4, 3, and good morning or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. My name is Dr. Centae Richards. I am the Assistant Dean at Prescott College in the field of education. Welcome. This is the second of, I believe, 5-part series that deals with what do you do as a parent when you have your little ones at home and they might be driving you a little bit crazy. Not because they're bad, but because they have their routine, you have your routine, and all of these routines are crashing in one place at one time, sometimes simultaneously. And all of a sudden you're teaching first grade, sixth grade, ninth grade, and 11th grade all at the same time. So that's a lot. And we are here to help you understand that we know that that's a lot. And if we can offer you any assistance with lesson plan design or any kind of emergency teaching remedy, please feel free to tune in to the webinar series that we will be having every Thursday for the rest of this month. So with that, last week we talked about just being prepared and knowing what resources you can avail yourself of, even though you may feel that you don't know what you're doing, you don't have the skill sets, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the disposition or the temperament right now. But just remember that we're all in this together, and you can relax and take a chill pill because the experts that are here with you now can help you with the little first aid kit for your teaching needs. So I'm going to turn it over to Ron Hennings. Ron Hennings is the coordinator of this program series, and he's going to introduce our guests.
Well, in addition to Dr. Richards on our panel, we have Mrs. Karina Ontiveros. She's a master teacher from Tucson Unified School District, specializing in culturally responsive instruction. And along with Karina, we have Dr. Kevin Chuck, who is also with Tucson Unified and master teacher in culturally responsive education, and Mrs. Rashonda Sneed, master teacher as well. So we have 3 master teachers along with Dr. Rich and myself.
Excellent. So this series is going to be all about lesson planning, designs, helping you to get your organization game on so your little ones or your big ones can acquire the education that they need and not drive you and themselves up the wall in the process. So fear not, this is what educators do all day, every day. We are not babysitters, as you have probably surmised by now. And we are here to kind of share some of the tips that we have when we are in the room with 30 people or even 120 people if you're in the high school. So let's get started. So first thing that we want to talk about is the importance of lesson plan design and the elements of what do we mean by effective instruction, especially when you're going across different grade levels and different subjects. What does that mean, and how do you plan for that? Ron, what do you have to say? Do you have any?
Well, I would like our parents to know that our intention here this morning is to give them some background in what goes into making a lesson plan. That teachers every evening sit down and they put together their lessons for the next day. And the teachers keep these things in mind when they're designing a lesson. So the more a parent understands and about what the teacher goes through in preparing the lesson, the better the parent can help execute that lesson with fidelity at the home, in the home site. And also the parents can feel free to communicate with their teacher if there's a question about some aspect of the lesson plan. This is very much a shared project now between parents and school. So I think that's one of the good things that's going to come out of all this, is a mutual respect for each person's role in getting their child a good education.
Yeah, I would say. And, I mean, there's nothing like a little bit of, proximity to bring all of those emotions together and out into the open. So we have opportunity to do that. And one of the things that we need to be aware of, as if we're not, is the learning levels of each student, especially if you have more than one student. If you are a mother of four or a father of four, you might be working with several different grade levels. And so what kind of ways can we be developmentally appropriate? What can we give parents in terms of knowledge around what is developmentally appropriate when choosing grade levels, Ron?
Dr. Richards, it occurred to me that really what our parents are up to right now, being challenged to do, is very much like the one-room schoolhouse teacher had to do. She may have three or four, he may have had 3 or 4 or 5 students, each one of them on a different grade level. So, I mean, parents, it's not unusual to have 3 or 4 children at home at everything from kindergarten to 12th grade. What the teacher first takes a look at is, what grade level am I teaching? What subject will this lesson be about? And they have to make sure it's developmentally appropriate for each child that works with that lesson, that it's purposeful, that it has a clear end in mind, and that it's thoughtful and caring, and it's in its design. We're trying to design success into our lessons, so every child comes out knowing more and understanding more and feeling better about learning than they did when they began.
Yeah. And I know a lot of parents are like, yeah, I know. I watched Dangerous Minds. I watched Lean on Me. I was a part of the school system for 12 years myself. So I know what there is to know. And slowly but surely, I'm getting phone calls every day from concerned parents realizing that they don't have it as down pat and they can't remember exactly what happened in school.
Dr.
Yet alone they were taught the material. Karina, what kind of, I'm sorry, my internet went out a little bit, but Karina, what kind of tools can teachers, and now new teachers, parents, avail themselves of to know what subject material is being taught, and how will they know that the student actually learned anything?
Okay. Well, thank you. One of the things that guide the work that we do across the United States can always be found on the State Departments of Education sites. And in that site, you'll find things like objective standards, and we think of objectives. But when we think about the work that we're doing with our kids and how we're approaching it in our settings, as you mentioned, with maybe multiple grades and maybe more than 2 children, more than one, how do we balance that? And one of the things that I, as a parent as well, find helpful is to be able to say, what can we do today? And how can we bring that down to what we're doing? And one of the things I think about in terms of when we think objectives or what are we going to accomplish is something you'll see in classrooms, the SWBAT, student will be able to. And that's kind of a neat thing to use on a daily, maybe lesson basis, that we're engaging with our kids to help guide the work we're doing.
So just to be clear, it's before you do anything, you should write down on your piece of paper, students will be able to, and then whatever comes after that is what the lesson should be about and what you should be looking to test the students' knowledge on. Is that correct?
Yes, and I encourage, and even would be an interesting little exercise to do on a family by family basis, to ask your child, have you seen SWBAT? That those letters together, that acronym, the children will probably recognize even more than the entire phrase, to be honest, because you'll see in classrooms SWBAT :
And
yes, and Dr. Richards, what you'll find, what the parents will find, is that the teacher wants the students to be able to know something new, a fact, a procedure, and they want the student to be able to do something that they couldn't do before, like tie their shoes the first day of kindergarten, or a new concept or an understanding that they want to have, maybe the law of scarcity in economics, something like that, which we're all experiencing right now.
And believe it or not, there's some magic to this. Students will be able to : phrase. It really helps to center your thinking on what it is specifically that your student needs to learn in this lesson. And you don't have to think about anything else, and you can put parameters around the lesson. So let's get back a little bit to what we were talking about this phrase called developmentally appropriate. What does that mean? That means that, well, the topic that you're going to teach your kindergartner is not going to be in the same way. It might be the same content material perhaps, but it's not going to necessarily play out in the same way. The learning is not going to take place in the same manner as a kindergartner would if you're a 12th grader. And so there's another part of this. After the colon comes a verb. Students will be able to verb. And that verb is a cognitive indicator. And Ron, would you like to explain what that means there? Uh-oh, looks like Ron is.
Yeah, no, I'm good. And you know, this is an action word that says a student will be able to run or to compute or to conduct some procedure that they didn't understand before, like solving for one unknown or some algebraic procedure or adding, you know, 300 numbers. So it's an action word in the sense that this is what the student will be able to do and demonstrate to the parent and to the teacher.
Yes. Also, it's also cognitively demanding. That verb that you put there will dictate how cognitively demanding the lesson's going to be. For example, students will be able to recite their ABCs, as opposed to students will be able to analyze various alphabetic systems across the country, across the world. That level of analysis requires a level of sophistication. We're gonna give you a list of verbs called Bloom's taxonomy of verbs that separates, so you don't have to think about how high or how easy you want your lesson to be. You may want it to be very cognitively demanding for certain students, and you may want to ease off after a particularly grueling day or lesson with some more lower cognitively demanding prompts for yourself. And so just remember, students will be able to verb. So, but what about English language learners or people who have special needs? Is there anything that can be done, Karina, for these students, particularly with limited English speakers?
I think once again that when we recognize we are in a different situation, that we first and foremost give ourselves permission and we feel the strength of the knowledge that we have as families. Dr. Louise Ball of the University of Arizona is credited and did a lot of groundbreaking research on the idea of funds of knowledge, meaning that regardless of who we are and where we're from and what our home languages may be, that's a fountain of knowledge upon which to base learning. So parents, it's okay. Embrace the language that you're comfortable in, that your children are comfortable in. If it's 1 or 2 or 3 or more, embrace them. That's part of your foundational learning. And because our brains are such incredible machines, the learning comes back and forth and across the content areas. There's just so much flexibility there, and that we are again beginning where we know, starting from where we're at.
But what about these? What about these standards, though? Did somebody have something to say? Go ahead.
I just want to say to the parents that your heritage language is a powerful asset in learning. Yes, the language of instruction in school is generally English here in the U.S., but your heritage language is a powerful way of knowing and understanding and a really important bridge to any other language that the student is trying to acquire.
I agree. And you know, it's up to the community to make sure that this phenomenon called language death doesn't occur, where, you know, first generations are fluent in Spanish, let's just say. Second generation may be bilingual, but by the fourth generation, it could be on the chopping block, the language and the culture that goes along with it. So it's up to the community to use those funds of knowledge, particularly in times when you can get to use them the most, when you're at home with your kids. But, we were getting ready to talk about standards though. There's some parents that are like, I don't even know what a standard is. Why do they even matter? Where can I even find them? Who gets to choose these standards? And why do we have to know them anyway? Why do students have to know them? And maybe we can clear that up a little bit, particularly because we have we're in Arizona, I'm in Arizona, but not just in Arizona, but in all around the country and the globe. There are state departments that, run K-12 education. But what can we tell our parents about standards and what they should be doing with them, if anything at all, Rashonda? Are you there, Rashonda? Oh, no. Well, does anyone else want to jump in? Dr. Kevin, would you like to say that? Because with that comes also the essential questions. You're on mute. Maybe Rashonda's on mute too. Make sure you unmute your.
Can you hear me now? Okay, now. Sounds like. Can you hear me now? Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So as to standards, basically it's kind of like that you're working from the end to forward, and these are the skills that you would want your student, in this case your child, to learn after you do whatever it is that you're going to do, right? And so if you want your child to make sure that they know how to add double-digit numbers, okay, that would be a standard that you would create. So students will be able to, add double-digit number with what, 80% accuracy or something. And that's your and so your standard is what guides you into what it is that you want your child or student to be able to master at the end of whatever you do, right? And so with an essential questions is a little different because it frames what it is that you're going to study in a question form. So it usually is open-ended and makes you think on a variety of levels and how you make connections. And it encourages absolute cooperation among everybody who's in the classroom. And that's that reciprocal teaching between student, teachers, student, and it supports that whole process of learning. And if you kind of look at it like an umbrella, okay, and underneath the umbrella comes, that's your essential question, and then under that you have standards, the skills that you would want to that would address that essential question, and then from there you have your objectives, and then from there you have your actual, what it is you're going to do, your process, your lesson process. And that's, I guess that would be the best way I would explain. Anyone else want to chime in with standards?
I really appreciate what you're sharing. I really appreciate what Kevin is saying, because when you think about it, it's like the standards being the foundational piece, and then and us working to what we're going to do at the beginning, knowing that as the basis of what we're looking at, these standards can be the overall guide to the work that we're doing.
Yes, and just so everyone is aware, usually, though not in all cases, you can find standards, because there are lots of people running around like, what do I teach next? Don't panic.
Yeah.
Your state has a whole list of standards that are normally separated and organized by subject area and by grade level. So you can drill down to not only the Civil War, but who shot, President Lincoln, and what happened to him in a standard that you can then extrapolate and make an entire lesson or two out of that. So if you're at a loss as to what the curriculum is or what you think you should be teaching in math or science or in kindergarten or in 8th grade, always turn to the state's Department of Education, wherever you are, and go into the search engine and type grade 4 standards or whatever grade you would like to do, and they will all pop up in every subject imaginable for you to feature. Just remember that, from which you can draw your essential questions that you want your students to know, like
and one more thing is that usually standards are written in such a way that they're sequential. Okay, and that's important. So you're not like overwhelming at the top or underwhelming at the bottom. So they're usually sequential, and that's important to know.
Mm-hmm. Right? So what we're saying is that if you're going to jump in the middle, just be aware that there may have been some other previous knowledge that the student needs to know before they can master that material. Right. So you can always start at the beginning and work your way up from the knowledge base that your students and you have, and move from there. That's always a good piece of advice. So if you can follow us, we've been kind of walking our way through a lesson, if you will, or the components of a lesson. We've talked about the standards, we've talked about the objective, which is what is it that the student will be able to do, the essential question that you want to ask, and usually there's a place for materials, right, Ron?
Yes. The teacher will tell you in the lesson, that plan that she gives you as a parent for the day, she will tell you what materials are needed. So you want to gather those materials together before you have your student or child sit down and try to work through the lesson. Have all these materials in hand and organized in a logical way that you're going to need them, just like the teacher would in their classroom. Most of these, the teacher will ask you to get materials together that aren't available in this typical household.
Yeah, and I wouldn't underestimate the importance of gathering the materials beforehand. There's nothing like running around looking for a pair of scissors for your art lesson, and then all of your best laid plans have gone awry. So it's important that, as corny as it sounds, like, I know where my scissors are. Go grab the scissors and put them in the work area that you're planning on working. Grab the glue, have everything you need, so that the least of your concerns is hunting for materials. So, anyone want to add to that? Very good. Just remember,
it's all about the logic that goes behind the lesson, that these lessons are carefully thought through and there's a logic to them, and follow them with fidelity as best you can at home, and have all the logistics in line before you start.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So I think we've lost Rashonda. Are you there, Rashonda? Looks like we might have lost Rashonda.
Yeah.
Looks like we have lost her. If you're there, you can always join in, Rashonda. She's a fantastic master teacher, but may have had her own children to attend to. So in any case, the next thing that you want to do for students is make sure that you have tapped into whatever it is that they know about the subject. So if we're talking about chemistry and you need to explain what a polysaccharide is in terms of the human body, it's best to figure out once you figure out what that is, which is a kind of a sugar, then you have an opportunity to tap the students' knowledge about different kinds of monosaccharides that they didn't even know they were ingesting, but they were ingesting. And do they like them? Do they not like them? What is it that they do? Did you know that monosaccharides are needed for DNA? And so it's very essential. It's not just a sugar, it's actually part of the glue that forms the building blocks of who you are. And so tapping into those knowledge will bring forth a lot of excitement, especially if they can relate to whatever it is that you're teaching. There's nothing worse than, you know, having something not relate to you. How many times in math class you turned to your neighbor and said, what does this have to do with me in my life? I don't know. Why do we have to learn this? So it's important that it's essential that you make those connections as clearly as possible so that the students can get excited about what the lesson is, because they already know a little bit about it. So, you know, egg them on, big them up, make sure that you put the stars on their head when they go in the direction that you want them to go. Because, you know, the stability and consistency in education are two of the key pillars of a successful lesson plan. Anyone want to add on to what can an anticipatory set do? That's what we've been talking about. The name of that is an anticipatory set.
Right.
Rashonda, did you want to address that?
I could go right into that and then go into actual input and monitoring if you'd like.
Sure.
If you want. Okay. Because look, okay. So I'm going to give you a forward and then go back so you understand what I'm doing. So the forward is this. I want my children and my students to be occupied in a spatial thinking activity that is relevant to this week, okay, that we're going to be doing. And so I'm combining art and math together, okay? So that's the top. Now my anticipatory set, it would be like, have any of you ever heard of tangrams? Do you know what they are? And depending on the response, okay, will depend on where I go next with questions. And so I would say, okay, well, tell me, what have you heard? And then I get that. Oh yes, it's a puzzle. You're absolutely right. Do you know where it comes from by chance? And then depending on that, what the answer would be, and maybe you know out there in virtual land, okay? Oh, it's from China. I said, yeah, you guys. And then what I do is I put a little geography in there. I always do that. Do you know where China's located by chance? Let's look it up. Okay. And then pending, right? And so that would be my anticipatory set. You're right, it's a tangram puzzle. And we're gonna make something special here for this week for spring. And some of us celebrate Easter and some of us don't, but in my family we do. So I'm gonna use it as an Easter, right? And we're gonna create some artwork with these tangrams, all right? Oh yeah, okay, so is everybody okay? We got our scissors. Materials are very important. We have our scissors, we have our glue sticks, okay, or glue, whatever kind, and we have our construction paper, or at this any paper that's coming from anywhere, okay? And so you guys know what shape the tangram is? You guys remember? Okay, yeah, you're right, it's a square. So look, I've got computer paper here. Is that a square? And hopefully your children will say, no, it's not. Okay, so how do you think I'm gonna fold this so I can get a square out of it? Can you practice and see? I allow them, and you want to allow them to explore, to see if they could do it, because you're working on their spatial thinking here, their spatial intelligence. I'm real into multiple intelligences, and you'll see why in a minute. Anyway, so okay, so let's say maybe one of them really gets it right. You've got it, okay? You folded it. And so all I need to do is cut off the excess paper, and when I open it up, I'm going to have a square. Okay, can you guys tell me how many pieces does a tangram have, that puzzle? 7, you're right, 7. So out of this square, I'm gonna need to make 7 pieces. The first thing I'm gonna need to do is make 2 congruent, we're gonna call this the tangram family. Okay, 2 congruent parents. Okay, congruent. You guys know what that big word means? And of course, if I have an older child, he probably or she probably will. It means they're the same. Right, okay, so I'm gonna cut it in half, my square, in a diagonal cut, and I have 2 congruent. And look, I place one on top of the other, and they're the same, right? So this is congruent. Okay, all right. So So I have to take one down. Now I'm going to make the family. So my question would be, instead of me just doing it, I want to engage the curiosity and I want to engage the higher level thinking. And I say, I need to make a mom and a pop. All right. How can I do that? Or a mom and a mom, the parents. I need to make, and they're congruent, remember? How am I going to fold the paper? Okay. And they'll get it. This part they usually get. Okay. I'm going to fold it in half. Right. And when you open it up, what do you see? 2 equal same size shapes. Okay. That's your mom and your pop. And then I'm going to say, now pick up the other piece that you had. All right. And in this one, I'm going to need to make 5 shapes out of this one. Okay. I'm going to need to make another triangle, a square, 2 other triangles, and a parallelogram. You guys know what a parallelogram is? Okay. And then I have them usually draw it in the air. If they could show me what a parallelogram is, right? They could draw it in the air. We pretty much have it. So you want to engage your kids with all other modalities. This is what you want to do. Okay. And so I'm going to say, okay, so I have to get, the first one I'm going to do here is going to be what I call the teenager tangram. So the teenager tangram is usually not an adult yet, right? So what size do you think it's going to be? Smaller, right? But it's not going to be the little one. It's going to be the bigger one, right? I mean, the middle, right? Okay, so how am I going to fold this? So I don't do it for them. Okay, because I want them to explore. And once they, do a little what I call productive struggle, because I think we all should have productive struggle, because once we get done with it, we're going to feel really satisfied, right, as human beings. So they'll figure out, some of them will go halfway, but we have to go all the way down, because remember, it's a teenager. And sometimes a teenager is, and if you have one in the house, taller than you, okay? And so, all right, so we go down there and we said, oh, can you see the teenager triangle? Yes. What's on the other side? What shape is this? Okay. And if you have an older child, they're going to know it's a trapezoid. It's a trapezoid. Okay. So now I have a trapezoid and a teenager. Okay. And I'm going to cut it out. Now, what's going to happen is that you eventually are going to work through all of those shapes, right? And you're going to end up with the parallelogram, the square, right? You got the teenager here, so you see that. And I'm trying to find I call these the cuates in Spanish. Well, actually, there's not one, but the gemelos in Spanish, which are your 2 smallest ones. So you have your 7 pieces, okay, by the end of and then you're going to say, well, let's see what shapes we can make with these. And since I said we were doing something with spring, I decided, okay, we're going to do bunny rabbits. Okay, let's see. Now, you may want to have this made already so they can look at it. And the older kids, I would challenge them to come up with the different ways you can make bunny rabbits. Okay, and this will work, and this will keep them involved. And then they can elaborate on that however you want. And at the end, we'll give the plate for the tangram puzzle.
Excellent.
And so
Kevin,
yeah,
that was great.
Yeah, so tell me, what would be the objective? You went through a lesson, and just for the test of the parents, like if they were to say, take a second and write down, students will be able to : what
Right.
would the objective be?
So the objective there would be students will be able to create a tangram puzzle efficiently, correctly. That would be the ultimate goal. There would also be a second one, and this depends on your questioning. Remember, I was saying don't do it for them. Ask them the question, have them explore, because this is requiring them to go into their spatial reasoning and to explore how they would do it. So my second one would be students will be able to analyze a shape and create another shape from it. And
Yes.
that is your mathematical, that's your mathematical thinking. Okay?
Excellent.
Spatial
And
thinking.
thank you
Mhm.
for that.
Kevin, you have taken us through participatory set, input, modeling, and guided practice, and checking for understanding. You've taken us through almost a complete lesson.
So
There
the
you go.
checking for understanding, I think that this is what stresses a lot of parents out is assessment. And it's not that deep, folks. Listen up.
No.
It is not that deep. All you have to do is do what we've been talking about, which is a check for understanding. Do they understand this 5-minute chunk of information that I just gave them? How do I know that? Were they able to recite it? Were they able to take it and combine it with something they already knew and make something new? Were they able to turn it around a different way from the way that I showed them and demonstrate understanding that way? There are myriad ways. Some ways are actually even fun for you to see whether or not the student actually got what it is that you said. And they don't need to know all the time that they're being tested. 9 times out of 10, my students, when I was teaching, they had no idea that they were being tested. But I was looking at them and I would put my little check mark up. He had that. Oh, she needs a little bit more support with that. Because what they thought they were doing was having fun.
Right. And that's the whole thing. If you can make it fun, the learning just comes naturally.
So, Karina, did you have any more words of wisdom for how checks for understanding can be made? Do you have any more words of wisdom for us?
Something that occurs to me, and I've used it myself and seen it done, is the idea of an exit ticket. Something as we are closing up, a question or even a drawing or some way that the child then communicates and shows that they have gone through the process of this exercise and what is their understanding at the end of it. That also helps us as we move forward, even if we take a break right after that exit ticket, that we move forward and use that at the next lesson, whenever that may be.
Mm-hmm. Never throw away work that your students complete, because you can always boomerang that joker right back for another lesson and at a deeper level, at a deeper understanding. So, during this time of coming together, make sure you save everything so that you don't have to recreate the wheel the next lesson, the next go round. Because a piece of writing can be revised 7 or 8 times and added on to over and over again with new vocabulary and new ideas, to the point where you can get some really decent writing mastery by just recycling some favorite work over and over again.
I will add that one thing a teacher can do, and of course a parent can do, is watch their child's reaction to the work that they're attempting. Are they engaged? Are they off task? Are they bored? Are they frightened and anxious? You want to intervene whenever necessary to bring them back to healthy, wholesome learning.
It's important. That's very good that you bring that up, because a lot of times it's difficult as it is for teachers and educators to admit this. Sometimes the fact that the student didn't learn is not the student's fault at all. Sometimes it was my bad attitude. I woke up on the wrong side of the bed and you were the first person I saw and you didn't do what I asked you to do right away. And so therefore I set up an atmosphere that really makes learning impossible. So it's important that you put on your best face and put your best foot forward for the students, because they 9 times out of 10 don't even know when you've made an error. And if they do call it out, it's always good to laugh at yourself, like, yeah, I did. 2 + 2 is not 3, and move on with it, because
Right.
it's a learning process together. So don't get hung up on mistakes. Don't get hung up on they're not doing it right. Focus on the objective. Focus on the essential question. Focus on the anticipatory sets, and then make it exciting for your students. So, but of course, one of the least exciting things is homework and independent study. What do you think about homework? Should homework be even given in a time like this, Ron?
I'm gonna, Rashonda, can you hear us? Go ahead and unmute.
Okay, I'm here.
Hi,
I'm gonna
Rashad.
give you a chance to speak and talk about independent practice and homework and things of that nature.
Absolutely. I think this is a great time to do homework. I mean, independent study, independent practice, it's a chance for students to go deeper in areas that they're interested in. It's a chance to gain that mastery. And you can do it in ways that are fun, ways that are interesting. For instance, if you're working with language, they can create a comic book. They can create an ad. They can create a commercial or do a newscast. There are ways for them to then put themselves in that independent practice and do things that are neat and different that they wouldn't necessarily do with the teacher or even with the different partner. So I think the homework can be really important, even if it's something like reading for 20 minutes on a book that you're really into. That's another thing that's always a great homework assignment, is some independent reading. But absolutely, this is a great time to do that.
If your child is assigned homework by his teacher and he can't or she can't do the work, finds it very frustrating, then you need to say, fine, you've given it a good shot here. I'm going to contact your teacher. You weren't ready for this homework. And so we need to go back and do some things differently so that you will be ready next time.
Yeah, scaffolding is really important. And it's one of the things that's hard, I think, for parents to judge. And they say, well, they sent this home. You guys are supposed to know how to do this. I'm not sure why you're not able to. Usually the answer is scaffolding. And sometimes we think the kids are just being obstinate, when really they may have a missing skill that's necessary in order to figure this out. I remember when I was doing advanced algebra, and the professor or the teacher put a bunch of stuff on the board, and it's like, you do this and you do that. And I was thinking, well, how do you know when to do that? And he said, well, it's intuitive. And I thought, it's not intuitive to me. I don't understand when to do this. I'm missing part of this. And that's where a lot of our kids are. So there's a skill or something that's missing that needs to be assessed. So you got to backtrack and get them back to that point and not make them feel bad about it. And let them know that's fine. I've missed a skill somewhere along the way that we've got to add in our toolkit, and then we can do this.
Our assumption is that every child wants to learn. Every child is doing their best.
I want to offer a little challenge here that is goes above and beyond with triangles. So I have the teenager and the two little cuates of the family. And my challenge would be if I have a student that does this very quickly, bless you, okay, because that means they've got some good spatial intelligence. But now I'm going to do a challenge. I have these three, and I can make most of the major shapes, polygons, out of these three shapes. And so I would challenge the student, okay, make me a square, make me a triangle, make me a trapezoid, and they have to move them around to do that, right? And so you're creating puzzles, right? That's what you're doing, but different types. So here's my triangle, for example. I'm trying to, here, oops, okay, how the shapes are made. And so that would be another way. And that could be spread out. I mean, you don't have to do all 7, all 5, okay, in one sitting, but you could do separate, but as a challenge as you go on during the day, during the weeks, right? Yes. And you could do it with 3, 5, and 7 pieces of the tangram.
And one of the other things you can do is just to come back to the anticipatory set. You know, I used to like to do a mystery or a quote or just an interesting concept or something that's tied to it. Well, by the end of that lesson, they kind of ought to be able to answer that. And that's always a good assignment too for independent study. Just, now that we've spent time on this, what do you think about it? How does this fit in? What do you think about this piece of music or this piece of art now. So the other thing for independent study, you can always go back to that anticipatory set.
Yes,
I'd like to
excellent.
give a great independent study activity is to ask the student to evaluate the lesson. What went well? What didn't go well? How can we make up that? How can I make that lesson better next time?
Especially at the beginning of another lesson. Excellent anticipatory set for that. And but there's also, I want to just draw your attention to the panel, as well as to those that are out there listening, to the essential skill that could always be bolstered by parents in the community, and that is how to study. This seems relatively simple, and yet it is a major downfall of a lot of the students in the public and private education systems. And partially what's to blame is because it's so it looks so simple. It seems so simple to do. You just sit there and study. Well, what does that mean for someone who has never studied before, for something that's high stakes, that's meaningful for them? And so that kind of scaffolding, if you want to use a little bit of education, that is what we mean by scaffolding is you're going to, a skill set is here that a student needs to aspire to, but they're here. And so how are you going to get them to here? Well, you can build a scaffold so that the students can easily access the material. So one way is to help students understand how to use a dictionary, how to use a thesaurus. These things seem very, very, very like, oh, they should have learned that in 3rd grade. Let's assume they didn't, okay? Right. And if they didn't, then what kind of studies habits and study skills can you and your students generate in your home that can last beyond this crisis and beyond the things that we're doing right now? Because once you learn how to study and study effectively, a lot of things that seem hard are all of a sudden not so hard anymore. So I just want to make sure to just throw this pitch out there for the parents. One thing that is invaluable, even indispensable to a student's education career is how to study effectively. And we can give resources and tips for that. But it's also reinforcement at the home place and actually supporting the student when they need the help with, and you know, not, because it's easy to fall into this trap. It's like, why didn't you study? One would never think that they didn't know how to study is the answer.
Yeah, I think especially for our kids that are K through 8, but even our high school kids, to say study is too broad. Instead, you want to say something like, I'd like for us to go over the vocabulary. I might say the word, I want you to go over the definition, or I'd like for you to pull out the key concepts in this reading. I'd like for you to take notes over the reading, or let's create an outline from this reading, or I'd like for you to generate some questions from it. But just to say study, they think by osmosis, if I just keep looking at this page, I'll pick it up. And I think it's broad for a lot of our kids.
You know, even asking our students in that process of creating the outlines or whatever it is that we're thinking about in the moment is to say, teach me, show me, what do you know about this that we've been talking about?
Or draw me a
Explain
picture
to me.
of the theme, okay, of this piece, of this article, of this story. What's the main theme or the character or whatever? Use your multiple intelligences to create that synthesis. It's not just necessarily take notes. So,
my dad used to say, if you can't explain it to me, then you don't know it.
And that's one to grow on. Unfortunately, we don't know everything as parents, and that's okay for you to know, or even have forgotten what happened in 9th grade, you know, because some things are better off forgotten. But there's also a kind of, I want to encourage you not to feel bad or feel less than a parent or feel guilty, because those are traps that's going to lead to a student being less than successful and you being less than successful in your teaching endeavors. So own up to your mistakes, own up to you not knowing. It's the best thing, it's the best release ever to say, I don't know. Because then you don't have the responsibility. Then you can both look up the information together.
So the thing is that I don't know this, but you know what? Let's look it up together. And there are different places in which you could look something up together, right? Because we all have, I think most of us have phones now.
Mhm.
That little phone has a lot of resources there that we could use, right? We may not have internet, or hopefully we do if we're looking at this program, but anyway, or we're gonna be looking at it on our phone, all right? But also depending on what kind of books we have at home too, if we have it. But that phone, we got a thesaurus there on that phone. We have dictionaries there on that phone. We have all types of resources, right, that we could look it up. Learn how to use that phone as a tool is great. Great way to start.
One of the things, oh, I'm sorry. One of the things I'd share is that we're also motivators. I think for parents, and you think back on your career and you think, well, they were tough on me or they were really hard. Yeah, that's part of our job, but then we're also motivators. And so the general rule of thumb I try to go by is 2 compliments for every criticism. So if there's something that's not working, there's a couple things you ought to be encouraging though, because you want to keep that strong relationship. Folks don't want to work for somebody who's riding them and not loving on them as well. So for parents too, I would just say part of this job, and I know it wasn't one you thought you'd be taking on, but part of it is being that encourager, that motivator, that supporter as well.
And to acknowledge,
I think
you know,
this is an opportunity for parents and students to learn together
Mhm.
and build that positive relationship.
being able to acknowledge the contributions, and I think it's very empowering for a young person to hear from an adult, those that they respect, is that, boy, I didn't know that. I learned something today from you. You know, it's all part of that motivation and that encouragement and that natural zest for learning that just builds upon itself.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to touch on a little bit of we've been talking about it a lot, but I want to just kind of touch on it. The fact that my niece, I was homeschooling her, couldn't do any math problems correctly unless she was listening to music.
Oh yeah.
And at first I thought she was listening to the answers because they were all correct when she was listening to music, but completely all over the place when not. This is a point that I really want to drive home, that the way that you and the way that I learn may not be the way that your student learns. Your student might need to look at a PowerPoint or watch a movie and get the same thing that you felt like the only way that you could have gotten that information was through reading a book. And that might not necessarily be the case. Like Alice was saying, that, you know, people need to get up and move around and cut things to make learning. They need to put things together and take them apart. Now, I would say that's a whole bunch of chaos. I am an analytical thinker, but that doesn't make the kinesthetic, meaning moving around, any less valid a way of learning for the students. And so I want to encourage parents and other teachers, for that matter, to open up their toolbox and open up their perspectives to other ways of gathering and acquiring knowledge and testing it. We're running out of time, but we have a couple of, one more thing. And that is, there's different spin that comes with being at home. And being at home, you may get information from grandma that says, well, this is the way that you do it. When someone hits you, you beat them down into the ground. And that's the way it is, because that's the way that this grows. Yeah. Or someone may say, I think Easter is the most horrible thing ever, and all of these, religious and social, cultural issues that are part of the family, and yet and still we want to ask the question, how can we continue to be culturally responsive and be culturally aware of, and help the student not be in such an insular atmosphere? I'll open that up to everyone. Why don't we start? I'll moderate this. Why don't we start with Kevin Alice?
Well, so of course, my big thing is that first you need to know thyself, right? And you need to know your family roots, okay? And that would be a nice time to have those conversations with everybody's at home. That would be great. And then from there, well, then we need to go out and start looking at some different perspectives from different kinds of walks of life, right? And you could do that through literature, and you could do that work through processes. Let's learn. You could do that through art. Okay, there are many different ways in which you can do that. But I really want to emphasize, know thyself first. I mean, a lot of our kids here in the Sonoran Desert, for some reason, really aren't aware of where they live, the place where you live. And it'd be nice to know the place where you live at this moment. And then from there, go out and explore other things and other ways. Mm-hmm.
That was Dr. Kevin Alice. Thank you for being here. Karina.
Thank you for the invitation.
It seems also that we give ourselves permission to value the stories that we have from our own families, our own experiences, and know that those stories are equal to any that you'll find in any book over the ages, from all of those, you know, in the canon of literature, that our stories should be and can be and must be part of that weaving of more, and that we can start there with this whole exploration.
Thank you. That was Ms. Karina Ontiveros. It's a pleasure having you. Thank you. Please come again. And Rashonda Sneed.
I'd say one of the things that to keep in mind is we're building an academic identity, but also an ethnic identity. It's important for our kids to see themselves in the work that we have. And a lot of our texts are missing pictures of us, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Indigenous people. And so if you're able to pull in literature that speaks to us, that speaks to our experience, that builds their self-confidence, that builds their cultural awareness. And we end up with folks that just have a greater sense of who they are in this world. So those are some options. If you can pull things in that have pride and have your own culture at the center, which is often missing in the educational settings, our kids will be better off for it.
Right.
I would have the parents take the opportunity to celebrate their family heritage, get out the family picture album, the family picture box, and just do some genealogy, some cultural points of reference for the family, things the families have, the struggles that the families have overcome through the generation.
Excellent history lesson. That was coming from Rashonda Sneed, first of all. Thank you for your expertise today. Pleasure having you. And Ron Hennings, who's the coordinator of all of this. And thank you so much for having us into your living room or on your phone or in your car or wherever you listen to us. Please feel free to give us an email at education@prescott.edu. That's education@prescott.edu. If you want any of the resources that we've been talking about, or you may have a question for one of the panelists. That was Dr. Kevin Alice, Karina Ontiveros, Rashonda Sneed, and Ron Hennings. And I'm Centae Richards, the Assistant Dean of Prescott College Department of Education. It's a pleasure, and tune in next week. Take care.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cierra la puerta.